thank you so much for taking the time to join us. There is a possibility to ask questions in the chat. I do not seem to be able to hear anyone. I think, Eric, that is probably on your end, Nicholas, as well. In the top of Teams, there are 3 dots. And if you click those 3 dots, you're able to go into device settings. And then hopefully you can set your sound in there. If not, then when this is available on YouTube, you will be able to hear everything. All right, so let's get started. Flip the page. Okay, so the agenda for today will be, first of all, we'll be going through what's new with the BDP series. We will just give you a very high level what's the difference between the BDP round 1, 2, 3 and what we now call BDP series. Then next thing is that we will be going into a detailed walkthrough of the submission guidelines or the requirements for participation. And during those, we will ask questions throughout the presentation, or will allow questions throughout the presentation. Once we get into each of the sections, we'll do a pause, and then we will look at the questions that have come in through the chat, and we'll try and answer them as best as we can. But let's get started. So what's new with BDP series? First of all, we are no longer in pilot. We are introducing BDP series, and there are lots of learnings that we have applied. There are so many things that we learned throughout the first 3 rounds, and we've applied as many as we can, and some of them, unfortunately, we weren't able to apply, but we'll be going through it with you, and then you will see, hopefully, what the difference is. Then we will actually try and be doing 3 series per year, which means that we start in February with intake for series 1. And then after that, every 4 months, we'll be doing another round of intake. So if you're not ready with your designs for series 1, there will be opportunities 3 times per year going forward. For series 1, we are doing an open intake. So everything, there's no theme in there, so you can submit anything, any kind of theme. Going forward, we might try and have themes as well, but for now, it's like an open intake. Everything is welcome. We're doing a maximum of 20 sets produced per design that make it through crowdfunding, and that's a change from 10,000 to 20,000. And then also we have decided to do 2 sets per household. As you might remember, those of you who followed us for round 1, 2, and 3, we had 1. We started out with 5, and we changed it to 1, and we decided to go with 2 because in that way you can both buy one that you want to keep. You can buy one to build as well. This was a request we had from the community after taking it down to 1. Also, a huge difference from the previous rounds is that we will only be maturing designs that can actually be produced if the crowdfunding minimum threshold of 3,000 is reached. And so in the past, as you've seen, we put forward 9 designs, and then the first 5 that reached the crowdfunding minimum were produced. In this case, we want to make sure that we don't waste anybody's time. So whatever goes through will also, if they reach the minimum, be able to be produced. The last thing I want to mention is that the entry barriers, as you have most likely also seen, are much higher than what we've seen in the previous rounds. There are a long list of submission guidelines that I will take you through, and hopefully that will make sure that nobody, starts building something that doesn't make sense. If it makes through, you have to start over again. So this is all something that we're doing in order to make sure that we give you the best possible chance of actually making it through. I'm getting a note here, so let me see. Okay, we need to let some people into the lobby, so we're just going to pause for a second. All right. So one of the things that is very important for us to emphasize talking about BrickLink Designer Program is that this is a program where the designs are designed and matured by LEGO fans, and the designs that come out and are produced in this program are for experienced builders. So these designs are not meant to be going into the general consumer base. These are designs that are made to challenge people like yourselves and people in the fan community. And of course, one of the things that is really, really great about this program is that we're staying true to the original design, which means that more than ever, we're working with the fan designers to mature the designs very far into the progress. At some point, we will need to take over and maybe make some final adjustments, but they will all be done in collaboration with the fan designer. And then, because of that, all credit to the fan designer. We do produce boxes where there is a BrickLink logo on the front, a LEGO logo on the side, and then a fan designer, a name or username on the front of the boxes as well. I want to take a look at, see if there are any questions that have come in. No questions so far. All right. In that case, I'll just tell you that I have 4 more people in the room here with me. I have Alex, who's our BrickLink Designer Program project manager. I have Rebecca, who's a BrickLink Designer Program expert in studio. I have Russell, that many of you probably know at least by name, who is an expert in all things that have to do with Lego bricks and everything. And then I have Tim here as well, who's helping do the moderation that you might have heard, Tim Courtney, that you might know from LEGO Ideas in the past. So let's move on to the submission guidelines, unless there are any questions that you have at this point. See? Okay.
Nothing more in the chat.
No more things in the chat at this point. In that case, we'll be moving into the submission guidelines. I'll ask Tim to share the BrickLink site where we have the submission guidelines available. I hope you've had a chance to already read through these. Since we are limited by 1 hour here, we'll quickly go through each of the sections, and then after each of the sections, we'll check the chat and then we'll answer any questions that are in there. And to just stress one more time that the reason why we have these pretty excessive submission guidelines are really, to support you guys in the process of getting ready for submitting a design to BDP. We went through these, we put in as much information as possible to sort of front load these requirements. We're not asking that everything is perfect when you're submitting. We're just asking, if you really want to take part in the program, go through these specifications or these guidelines, because they're going to really set you up for success. Like it says here, set your base plate up for success. Also, what we've seen after submitting this is that, hey, the audience we're aiming at here, they really love that there are some detailed specifications available. And what we've been trying to do since we announced on Friday last week last week. Since we announced, we've actually been, monitoring questions that have come in on social media, on the forum, and through email to us. And we have updated the FAQ with some of those things. And after the meeting today, we'll be doing another update on the FAQ so that we're certain that we have as many questions answered in there as well. So that is a pretty rich FAQ. So if there are questions that you have, not necessarily through this session, but when you start designing, please reference that FAQ. All right, let's get started. So designing in studio. Okay. So first of all, very low practical. you'll be required to build your design in Studio, and you will be required to upload a Studio file in the submission upload page when it's available in February. And there are some links in here to where you can download Studio. We'll mention it again later, but very important that there will be updates to Studio or to the BrickLink Designer Program series palette. So once every day, shut down Studio, reopen so that you have the updates available. There's also a link in here to the Studio Help Center that has been recently updated with good guidelines, good videos. And I think, as I saw someone saying online, that yes, you know, this does require a very experienced studio developer or studio designer, but there's time. There's about 2.5 months still, so you will have the time to actually get to know Studio and start learning how to build digitally and still be able to participate in this program. We also created a BrickLink Designer Program Studio Forum. In the Studio Forum section, there's a link here as well. Please go in there because any questions answered or asked in there will be answered so that everybody can see. If you move on to file setup for BDP. Okay. We will be sharing the BrickLink Designer Program Series 1 palette. It will be available. It is actually already available in Studio. In that, you know, the reason for it's being so important to use the BDP palette is because that palette consists of elements that we are almost certain, because some things, you know, can change throughout the way, but we're almost certain that these elements will be available at the time we get to producing the sets that make it through. And there's a tip in here. Please make yourselves acquainted with the BDP palette so you know all the options that you have. But this palette consists of approximately 9,000 elements. We also had some new features added to Studio. For example, turning on the color palette filter and selecting the within the selected palette option. As those of you who are familiar with Studio will know, you know, you have been able to select, you know, colors that don't exist even, and you build like a fantasy setup. In this case, do yourselves a favor when you're designing and select, you know, within the selected palette colors, because that way, you know, you won't be designing with elements that are not available. We have made it possible to upload designs to the submissions when that are not 100% matched to the palette, but in that case, it will have to be changed if you should make it through, and also it will increase your possibility to make it through if the elements you used for designing are 100% within the palette. There's another feature, turning on the collision feature is an advantage as well, because we will be looking into the stability or, you know, the, what do we call it? Not just the stability, but what do we call it instead?
You don't want the parts to intersect each other.
Yes.
That's just the standard Studio feature.
Yeah, so there's some standard features in there that it would be an advantage to add. Turning on the snap feature as well, and then selecting the grid size that you want, and you can, there's some good explanations in here to how you can do this. Periodically check the model stability. It's going to help you as well. Periodically validate that parts list, and if you select this, you will be able to see which parts are actually not in the palette. And also that I guess said in the beginning, every day close down Studio and restart it to receive any software updates that might be in there. I'm going to pause here and just see if there are any questions related to anything we just went through.
Yeah, so we've got a question here about piggybacking, you know, about anything that's a castle could be considered similar to another castle. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that first.
We can, and we will get to it later as well. We don't advise piggybacking off existing designs or IPs at all. We did see that question coming in previously, and it's actually not a bad idea. We have talked about it in the past to have maybe a theme where we have add-ons to existing designs. That would then be BDP designs. But for now, I would say when we're doing accepting entries into the program, if there's a chance for a better chance to make it through, do not be piggybacking off anything. Do not build anything that comes close to any other IP. These are things that we will be checking for.
Well, and you're talking about an external IP, a third-party IP, right?
Yes.
And then, but as an example, you have these generic Lego IP, kind of evergreen IP, like a castle or like a spaceship.
Oh, yes. I mean, if we're talking about yes.
So don't make it a companion to an existing set. Don't make it an add-on to an existing Lego set. But if you're going to make another spaceship or another castle, that's going to be fine.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions?
Yeah, let's, why are there no printed tiles in the BDP Series 1 palette?
Yes.
I answered that.
Yes, Russell
okay.
answered that.
They will be added within the day. They're on schedule.
Okay. Could you please elaborate on not for general production, but for experienced builders? Does this mean we're looking for complexity or intricacy? How might a simple, elegant design hold up in the competition?
Okay, so actually when we say this is for experienced builders, we're not actually focused on, what type of design that makes it through. What we're focused on here is that the designs where we're, for BDP will not be going through the standard LEGO Group process of quality assurance. And we have quite a high number of quality requirements because there is that LEGO logo on the side of the box, and that requires us to sustain a level of quality. But we will be allowing things in BDP that will normally not be allowed in a LEGO set. And because of that, this building experience for someone who is not an experienced builder might be bad or worse than, we would wish for. So this is very much designed to give our fan community a challenge, I would say. If you have done any of the previous BrickLink Designer Program sets, like I said, we took a lot of learnings throughout the process. And if you're looking at round 1 sets versus round 3 sets, the quality will have increased. Not that it's not cool designs in round 1 and 2, but just that the stability maybe of the builds or the complexity of the builds have been changed to a different quality at the end. Does this answer the question?
So.
Okay. Any further questions?
Yeah, let's do just a couple more quick ones here. If we have a build that has multiple sections, should those be submitted as one studio file or several? Studio can get weird if you have a car and a building and the same instructions, even if you use submodels.
Yes, I'm gonna let Russell answer this question.
Can I answer? There are situations, technical situations where you may have to have 2 studio files, but we really would encourage you to try to put them in one, even if it plays with the instructions a little bit. So yes, if at all possible, put it into one studio file, and I think it is. The instructions don't have to be that fancy.
Okay.
Okay, is there a parts minimum and maximum? And that's a simple one, but
yes,
yeah.
There is a parts minimum and maximum. A minimum is 400 elements and maximum is 4,000 elements, and this is a strict requirement.
And we also want to make sure that people are not breaking apart. Like, let's say there's a 1x8 that could be used. Don't do 4 1x2s to make it reach 400 elements.
Yes,
so
we'll
we're
get
also
to all
very
those.
conscious about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on a little bit, so you continue to monitor the questions, and then we'll move on here. So for design requirements, make sure that your theme is appropriate for a family-friendly audience. Just because we are targeting adults doesn't mean that we can just use themes that are inappropriate for kids. And if you go into the terms of service, you will also be able to see some more detail about what do we consider as inappropriate themes. Also, don't use any intellectual property that belongs to anybody else, including the LEGO group. And in general, stay away from designs that are overly similar to something that the LEGO group has recently produced. For example, modular police station is the example here. Don't submit a modular police station of your own, even if it's a different design. And this is set to, we would love to see all your beautiful modular police stations, that don't get us wrong. But in this case, we're also trying to make sure that to set you up for success in a way, what's going to actually be able to make it through in the program. Also, it says here, don't piggyback on an existing LEGO set by building a model that is an extension or companion, like we talked about before. And please also do reference the terms of service. And I will, if we have time in the end, I'll go into a little bit into the terms of service just to make sure that we have this covered as well. Let me jump on to size. We'll select a variety of model sizes in each series. Like I said before, minimum of 400 parts, no more than 4,000 parts. But we will also try and make sure that there's a variety of sizes in each round, so we won't be putting through 5 designs with 4,000 parts, or for that matter, 5 designs with 400 parts. We'll try and find a balance in there. And as Tim mentioned before, models should be optimized to use the fewest number of parts possible based on the palette. So don't manipulate the part count by using a bunch of smaller parts instead of larger ones. There are no hard limits to the number of unique parts or color combinations, but please don't add unnecessary complexity to your model in this regard. Any questions we should cover before we move on?
So there's a new question here, and that is, should submissions have all submodels released?
We want the submodels.
Yes.
We want the submodels. That's what makes the instructions possible. Yeah.
Did people hear? I want to make sure with the microphone.
Yeah.
People heard that. Yeah. How important is build technique innovation?
That's a good question. Build technique innovation.
Does innovation mean going beyond what you normally do with LEGO bricks?
I think build technique innovation in this case, actually, I think using parts in an interesting way, or using different building techniques, it's only cool. But be careful to read these guidelines, because there are some, and I'll get into that. I'll move on a little bit. I just saw there was another question coming in. If you don't make it through series 1, will you be able to submit to series 2? And that is also a very good question. So let me answer that. We have designed the program in the way that, first of all, if you have already submitted a design to LEGO Ideas and your design did not make it to 10,000 votes within the timeline, or your design made it to 10,000 votes but never made it through the selection and never became a LEGO set produced. In those cases, you can submit to BrickLink Designer Program. If you submit to BrickLink Designer Program but you don't make it through, then you will be able to submit your design once more, so that the same design can be submitted twice. If you submit to series 1, there is only 4 months until we start intake for series 2, but at least before the intake for series 2 is completed, you will know whether or not your design made it through. So you will actually be able to submit it even to just the next round. Throughout the submission process, we will be going through the submissions that come in, and we will be able to provide you with feedback. We will see a wonderful design, but let's say there's not 100% match with the palette. We might come back to the designer and say, there's an issue here with the elements you used. If you're able to fix it, would be great, because we love your design. But keep in mind that essentially what's going to make for the design making it through or not is very much the crowd validation that comes after the submission, where the community is in there and showing their love for your designs.
Do we want to do the color validator or no?
Sylvan answered that.
Sylvan
I
answered
think we
that.
need to continue in
Yeah.
order in respect of time. So for part selection, only use parts in the current official BrickLink Designer Program palette. And when we say current, it's because there will be a BDP Series 2 palette, Series 3 palette, and so on when we open for those series. Some assemblies like minifigure torsos, they have to be broken up in studio to be positioned in a certain way. Avoid breaking assemblies whenever it's possible, and do include information about any broken assemblies in your notes. And this is the first time we reference the notes. We're actually encouraging designers to maintain a document throughout their design, keep notes about special things that we need to be aware of. And in these submission guidelines, we'll reference, keeping something in those notes that you should have on the side of this whenever you go through your designs, and what you should put into those notes. And 3 here, it's helpful to use bright colors inside your models. You will have seen this in standard LEGO models as well, just to have that contrast available in the building instructions, making it easier to build. Balance your colors, part size, and shapes. Do not use an excessive number of printed or expensive parts when a simpler solution would also work. This is gonna, have an effect on the final price for the designs that make it through. Each minifigure head may only be used once in a submission. And then we have deliberately excluded the following types of parts from the palette: plain string, most electrical components, fabric parts, plastic sheets, and printed parts that have a strong association with an existing intellectual property. Quick questions?
Yeah, super quick one that we didn't get to earlier, and I want to make sure that we get to, and that is for stability. Say that we wanted to build a mech, and so should we follow some recent building principles and not include the knees, or since we're aiming for an older audience, might that be allowed?
Not including
Knees on a mech for stability. Something about Voltron doesn't have any knees, right?
Yeah.
And that was a key to the model being stable. So would that be allowed for this?
Stability will be a big focus for these designs as well. So if you've seen whenever, we're going to encourage that, it's in here as well, that we will encourage you to build whatever you submit physically as well, just to check that stability and not just rely on studio for making sure the stability is okay. So I would say in this case, do try and make your designs as stable as possible.
Okay, and I think one more before we move on, and that is, how do we know which parts are, quote, expensive? Is the aftermarket cost a good indication of that?
Another good question. Sure, I think maybe you
Generally
can
speaking,
use that, yes. Let's move on.
I mean, yeah, that's.
Next here, going into parts usage, don't stack large plates on top of each other or create any construction that can't be taken apart easily. There are exceptions to this rule. One is the Technic turntable. Also, hoses, outer cables, and other decorative elements must not be used for structural purposes. And we have a very specific one here. The 2x2 turntable base must not be used as a decoration. It always has to be paired with the turntable top. And of course, and I see there are some familiar faces in this meeting as well. Some of these things or examples are taken from round 1, 2, and 3, things that we know we have already gone through model governance with, and they came back and said, nah, this is not accepted. And then our intelligent community members, they will say, but you did that in an old model, but unfortunately some things have changed and we won't be able to do that anymore. Also, make sure that the printed surface area of a pattern brick isn't touching other parts, like you can see in the example here. And parts on the edges of a model that are connected by a single stud must be tested physically to make sure that they don't easily fall off. Moving into stability. So the main issue that's come up is the importance of the stability in the model. And it is imperative, like I mentioned before, that every measure is taken before a model is submitted to make sure it's going to stay together. When a model is being physically built, parts shouldn't break off, collapse, or fall off under normal building pressure. And ideally, the building process should consist of parts being pressed downward on a flat surface. Squeezing bricks together between the fingers or hands it's discouraged. But, you know, as we are designing for adults and for AFOLs, this, you know, it's not an absolute no-go, but shouldn't, you know, in any way possible, let's try and avoid that. There must be enough connecting points to keep parts straight and aligned with the natural planes of the model. Drooping walls are difficult in aligning all studs and are signs that the model isn't strong enough. Bricks and plates should overlap whenever possible, like you can see in the picture below. And also, you see here, the whole model must be stable enough that it can be picked up with 2 hands and moved without falling apart. When building with Technic pieces, all sturdy connections must be made using friction pins. Don't use non-friction pins simply for aesthetic or color reasons. And don't overbuild by filling bricks inside the model that aren't needed for stability. So try and find that balance there. Any questions at this point?
This is the swooshability factor. Yes. No, there's no, I don't see any new, I guess the one that Russell answered it in the chat, but do the model designers have to be 18 years old or older?
Yes. You have to be 18 years or older to design with Studio because this is going to be a contractual relationship, and also because BrickLink is an 18+ platform. All right, so submodels was something we had a question about earlier, and they are a distinct part of a larger model. Build-in submodels instead of adding individual parts to one giant model is critical. Label your submodels with intuitive names, for example, a chandelier, a second floor. Second floor might be a little big actually, but so others using the Studio file can easily navigate around the model. There are no limitations to the number of submodels per design. And add parts to the submodels in the way that you'd naturally build. For example, overlap bricks for strength and make sure that each added brick attaches to another brick. An example of a submodel here is a minifigure knight, including head, torso, legs, helmet, body armor, and so on. So moving on to building experience. I have a question over here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the palette final, or will new pieces be added in the next days or even weeks, apart from the printed pieces that Russell mentioned?
In principle, no. We have opened up for design now, and we will allow you to use that palette in there. When the next time we will change the palette will be once we select the 5 designs that will make it through. We will give those designers an updated palette that might have a bit fewer elements. And that always has to do with, you know, whatever changes the LEGO group makes will, you know, add or remove elements. But in this case, we'll only be removing the ones that aren't there anymore. For Series 2, when we are ready with the Series 2 palette, that palette will include new elements compared to the ones we have. The open building experience. Your model or your designs will have to undergo testing and building with physical bricks by the BrickLink team. And you should aim to make your design as successful as possible in the world of physical building. That's why previously when we talked about encouraging making that physical build yourself, build your model in Studio in the same way you imagine you would build it in real life. Try building your model with physical bricks to test for model stability, safety, and building experience. So the experience of what it's like when you're building your model. Separate your model into logical building steps and create instructions. And this will also help you test for errors which you'll need to fix before uploading your design. Assembling the physical model shouldn't require specialized building skills or techniques that are learned through years of experience. However, do challenge that a little bit. As long as it's an allowed and accepted building technique, then do test us a little bit on that one, because that's what makes these designs also truly exceptional. But this does include, and these are the extremes, you know, and this is definitely a learning from previous rounds, precision alignment of Technic gears. Not only is it extremely complex to get the model to function properly, but it's also extremely complicated to make building instructions that explain exactly how this should be done. Also, the easing of Technic elements fixed to an axle, advanced sticker placement techniques, and partial or subjective positioning of elements. For example, a fractional rotation of a 1x1 element. Minifigure construction should take place throughout the building experience and not be confined to either just the beginning or the end of the instructions.
So we've got a quick question here, and that is, are we allowed to submit something akin to a 3-in-1 creator set where multiple builds are possible within a single batch of parts?
Yes, we had this question before, and this is, when we launch something like the designer program and we think, oh, we thought through everything. We can't imagine there are more questions that we haven't answered. But actually, in this case, for Series 1, no, that will not be possible. And the reason for that is that the workload related to both from the designer, but from our team as well, to doing 3 separate building instructions for one design at this point is not part of the calculation here. Going forward, that is an amazing idea, and it's definitely something that we'll take into consideration for future designs or future series.
Okay, should we move on?
Yes. So if we're talking about working models, technique movement must be smooth and stable. Don't use excessive sequences of gears or long winding power flows or anything that bends or stresses the elements. No movement should require special hand alignment or coordination to work, and the movement must work reliably when repeated dozens of times at various speeds. Parts that are designed to function, for example, propellers or doors, must function in the model to the complete extent they were designed to function. Hinge plate or hinge bricks are an exception and may be static. Doors must have handles attached. So don't put a propeller in a place where it's not able to turn around, basically. If combining gears from different families, make sure they mesh correctly without binding or slipping.
Good for now.
Yes. Stressing the elements, don't insert a stud into a Technic pinhole or a half pinhole. You can see here what to do, what not to do. Only flexible parts must be bent. Bending any other parts is strictly prohibited. When building horizontally or snot, be careful not to interfere with the LEGO logo on the stud, as you can see in the picture below. All angles that are closed at both ends must be perfect. The parts must form a legal connection in studio and must be geometrically sound unless variable length elements are used to compensate. Also, designers need to be aware that any angle other than the standard angles of wedges and connectors may present problems and will need to be examined closely. For angled roofs especially, designers are encouraged to leave one end of the roof unattached to avoid an issue with a closed angle.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. For minifigures, there is a maximum of 1 minifigure per 325 parts, and each minifigure head may only be used once. Minifigures must be constructed logically with matching torsos, hair, etc. Minifigures will go through a governance process similar to the model itself. And if you use a minifigure head with print on both front and back, hair must be used to cover the reverse side of the head. For stickers, stickers should only be used where needed. A maximum of 1 sticker per design, one sticker design may be used for every 250 parts. Duplicate stickers don't count toward that maximum. So if you have the same sticker and you have 10 copies of that sticker in your design, that is okay, but 25 individual design stickers. However, there is a hard limit of 25 stickers per model. A single sticker shouldn't span across multiple elements. Stickers can't be placed on surfaces that curve in multiple directions, so we don't put a sticker on a dog, for example. Stickers must be free of intellectual property. Complex designs may need to be simplified because stickers can only contain a certain level of detail, and colors are limited to the official LEGO element colors. And you can only use 8 colors per sticker sheet. Stickers must cover the entire surface on which they're placed. I heard somebody said on social media said, yeah, if only that was true, that it covers the entire element. But you know, hopefully what is meant by this. Except for stickers with transparent backgrounds, you can use those differently. The background of sticker sheets can be white, transparent, or mirrored. and the artwork on the sticker must not contain any objectionable content, a suggestive text, inappropriate images.
Okay, we just have one question here, and that is, are stickers different than prints? Is this implying that we're allowed to design an original sticker sheet?
Yes, you are allowed to design an original sticker sheet, and you're encouraged to as well. I didn't finish the previous section.
I thought we did.
Yes, confusing configurations of stickers have to be avoided. So for example, putting the same sticker on different colored parts or using it upside down and so on. And also all stickers on a given sheet must be easy to distinguish from each other, from one another. Even if you design your own stickers, which we do encourage, the sticker designs will still go through a LEGO sticker designer that will adjust the stickers.
Oh, here's a really great question. How are the stickers designed for Studio? And that is, you use well, Russell, you go
You
ahead.
can use the part designer to make your own parts. And that way that it will show exactly how it's supposed to look. So that it's actually a very easy process. But one thing we want you to do is to document the stickers that you have planned for a set, list them out, list which parts they're on, what color of parts, so that we can find them and see them.
That's in the notes. And so there's also, you know, in the Studio forum, outside of the BDP forum, and also you can ask us and we can make sure to put some more in the FAQ. But if you're not familiar with Parts Designer, it's a companion application to BrickLink Studio. If you're on the Studio download page, there's a tab on the top that you just toggle over on the right-hand side, and that will show you Parts Designer. Actually, because people might not be familiar with it, I'm just going to go and share this really quick so that people can see it. If you go to Studio on the BrickLink site and you go to download, and then right here is Part Designer. Now, Part Designer, like I said, companion application, and you're able to take like a ping image, and then you're able to put it onto the element and then save out a custom part and use that custom part. So again, you can find in the Studio help guides, or I'm sure you can also go to fans on YouTube to explain this and really learn all about it. But it's a really, really cool application if you haven't designed your own sticker in Studio.
Great, thank you. Also, moving on to building instructions. When you're taking part in the BrickLink Designer Program, you are responsible for creating building instructions for your design that follow the requirements that we have in here. And I think there was actually a question that just came in about the sharing of the files. Russell, you're answering it?
Yeah, submission stage.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. So we're not accepting the submissions just yet, but in February, when we open for submissions, then you'll be able to share the files with us.
Yes. All right, so in step editor mode, guidelines for the first step, make sure to start with your foundation elements, base plate, vehicle base, etc. Elements laying side by side with no connection are not allowed, and keep the number of elements to a minimum, so 1 to 3. Guidelines for the following steps: keep the viewing angle as consistent as possible and limit the number of changes to the viewing angle. Any angle changes should be noted for when you enter page design mode. Only use 5 different elements at the most and 10 total elements or less in each step. Don't build more than 12 studs in any direction unless it's one full element. Also avoid placing elements on different levels in the same step. When building a wall, for example, when building a wall, don't place elements on the bottom and top of the wall on the same step, as you can see in the example here. Tall or narrow elements or submodels should be in later steps, not in the beginning or midway point of the instructions. Also insert small decorative elements or submodels before enclosing the model. This means that if you're building a house, construct 3 of the walls and add any furniture or anything that goes into that or other submodels inside before adding the fourth wall and roof. And this is actually a small video that shows that. You can see here what to do and what not to do. Once an element is placed, it can't be removed or hidden in future steps. And building techniques must be consistent throughout the model to the extent possible. Sequence your building instructions so there's a logical connection where all elements are attached, or in other words, there should be no floating elements in your instructions. I think we're mentioning that below. If for any reason there are floating elements in the instructions, this is definitely something to put in the notes that you'd use for submission. Any questions at this point?
No other ones relevant to the guidelines.
Okay. Moving on to Studio Page Design or page setup. When you're in page design mode, page setup is located in the top right corner. Click on page setup will open a new display window. Change the size to letter. Set the margins to 10 for all sides, top, bottom, left, and right, and apply changes. For page design, part size scale and model size scale must be the same ratio, and all elements in the step must be visible. Avoid covering the model with the parts window and step number, and keep viewing angle changes to a minimum, like mentioned. Insert a flip icon when changing viewing angles of 90 degrees or more. And the color of the parts highlight feature is set to red by default, and you can change this if another color is more suitable. Insert a size guide when using elements that look similar, and I'm sure you all understand what that means. So, any questions we need to answer?
Nope.
Good. So for submission upload, prepare your submission information ahead of time. Like we mentioned, the submissions will open on February 1st. It will be open until February 28th. And throughout that month, we will be going through the submissions on a daily basis and being able to come back to you. If you follow these guidelines, chances are you will make it through to crowd validation, which is happening from the 8th of March. And this is where you go, you should get out there, promote your designs, get people in there and react to the designs, because it will be a substantial part of the selection of the models that make it through to crowdfunding. In here, we will be asking you to add the title of your design, a description of your design. It's optional if you want to share notes for the BDP team, but if you do, we will accept those notes in a Word format, PDF, or within the text box in the submission page. And we will also be asking, of course, most importantly, for you to add your studio file in there. Also, you will be able to add high-resolution images, and we will allow up to 10 of those, so make sure you get some really cool renders of your images in different angles. And a tip here we mentioned before as well, please take notes while you're building so that it's fresh in your mind. And like I said before, if you're using any floating bricks, make sure you mention it in your notes.
And just before we move on, I want to call out the obvious. On the top there, it says February 1st, 2022. We see the typo, and we will be fixing that in
that is
future
definitely
release.
a typo.
So.
Okay, so put render quality high, use the 4:3 ratio, and the resolution minimum of 1080 pixels wide. So this is these are the general submission guidelines, and I will open up for more questions. I'll give you time to ask those questions, but there are a couple of things from the terms of service that I would like to highlight. First of all, when you're submitting your design to the BrickLink Designer Program, and until we have selected the 5 designs, there's sort of a hold on your design. But as soon as we announce who's making it through to the I don't think we need the terms of service, Tim. We can stop sharing for now and actually just go back into the presentation to the latest page. We will have a hold on the design, but the second we know are able to announce who's making it through in each series, we will release you from those obligations. And this is in the terms of service. This means that at the time that you know when you will be, if you're making it through or not to the crowdfunding part, you actually will then get back the rights to your designs, and you'll be able to submit to LEGO Ideas. You will be able to submit to a future round of the BrickLink Designer Program as well. The other thing that I want to highlight from the terms of service is that making it through BrickLink Designer Program will require you as designers to spend a substantial amount of time maturing your design together with the BrickLink Designer Program team. This means that from the time of you signing the contract, being part of the 5 sets that make it through, until we actually have a design that is ready for production, there will be a substantial amount of time. And we put in there, it could be up to a few hundred hours on your end, and within a period of, I don't remember what exactly we said, but probably 1 to 3 months. So if you are, already that for this series timeline, you won't be able to do that, it's probably better to submit your design to a future series instead. Any questions over?
Yeah, so we have one here. Is it allowed to build the model physically and include actual photos?
We encourage you to build the model physically. If we don't have a digital design, it can't be allowed through in the program, because actually part of the selection criteria will also be looking for digital design capabilities. So this is critical. If you have built the model physically and you'd like to include images of that along with your digital renders, we would be more than happy to take a look at those as well. How many people are behind that camera? Actually, I think I mentioned it in the beginning. There are 4 people behind, or actually 5 in total, but there's 4 more than me.
Pay no attention to the minifigs behind the curtain.
Yes. So any further questions?
We're at a pause for questions. So
Okay.
here we go. How many participants do you anticipate for round 1? And I think we don't really know.
So participants, you mean, not the 5 that make it through, but how many cool submissions we're going to see? Oh my gosh, we have talked about that a lot actually, and the more the better. We're hoping to have a lot of designs come in. We're hoping that we will be in a situation where we have so many designs, it's going to be crazy to get through everything, but that would be a luxury. I have no idea. How many are we hoping for? Yeah.
1 million.
1 million. 1 million great designs. Yeah. Are we allowed to post pictures or info about our designs before or during? Some of the designs, so when we do the submission period, the designs that are submitted will not be visible to anybody but the BrickLink team. So at that time, we would not encourage you to share it anywhere else that you have submitted to the program. No.
Unfortunately, some designs can be stolen that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It probably wouldn't be because it would disqualify you or anything, but you might not want to share that, right? And
yeah,
have
well,
other
as long
people,
as you haven't handed over the right to your design to anybody else, it's eligible for the program. And we had the question before that if you already designed something and you're selling the building instructions, could you submit to BrickLink Designer Program? And yes, you could, because you haven't handed over the rights to your design to anybody in that case. But if you submit to BDP, you should stop selling building instructions and then focus on getting the design through BDP. The advantage here is that we only have a hold on that design until we selected the 5 that make it through. And, so once we know that, if you don't make it through with your design, you're free to do whatever with your design after that.
No more questions right now. Are there any, before we wrap up, we're just about at time. So thanks everyone for your attention. If there are there any final questions?
If not, then what's left to say? Oh, I'm missing the last page here, Tim. Nothing is showing up.
There we go.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining and for the great questions. And we really hope to see all of your amazing designs in February when we open up. So now you know what to do for the holidays, and happy holidays, and see you next year. Take care, everyone. Bye.